your album is The Social Animals. It came out a couple of weeks ago. What did you do on the day when you released the record finally?
I drove to Muscle Shoals to rehearse.
There you go.
I mean, like, it was, the timing was just kind of funny. We needed, with South by Southwest coming up and all the guys that are playing with me, they're all out of Florence, Alabama, Muscle Shoals area, Sheffield. That was the one day we could have a practice as a whole band before March. And so my wife and I drove up there, and then I also celebrated by my wife and I run our own brand and boutique called Club Duquette.
Right.
And so we took a bunch of our stuff, and Ben from Single Lock Records, he and his wife own a coffee shop / record store up there, a little snack shop place. It's amazing. So we did a pop-up. We went up there and rehearsed and ate dinner with my manager and friends, and just, got to have alone time with, my wife without our amazing son, but without him screaming at me.
So it's interesting because I know about the Club Duquette thing, and it sounds like these days musicians like yourself maybe have to have a few things going on in order to make things work financially with the way the music business is. And so I'm guessing that's part of the deal.
I mean, that's some of it. I think, like, there's been times where music has paid me well, has supported me. I mean, all through my 20s, that's all I did. I mean, right. But back then, major record labels were giving bands, young kids, ridiculous amounts of money. Yep. But we just were always working for ourselves. We worked in video production and photo production. And part of what my wife did was she was a stylist, and we just always wanted to work for ourselves and be creative. And she's a visual artist and a painter. So Club Duquette was like, all right, how can we make a place that incorporates kind of everything we do? It's about art and music and fashion and bringing people together and having a space where we can throw these parties. Like North Face, the brand, back when it started in the 60s, they would throw these parties in San Francisco that were just legendary. Yeah. Rock bands, folk bands, and the Hells Angels, everything. And I wanted us to do that in our little neighborhood where we could get away with a lot of stuff because we were off the radar from the city. So
yeah, definitely. All righty, very cool. So getting to the Social Animals, you got a pretty cool band assembled, kind of based around Steve Shelley from Sonic Youth. But my understanding, it was recorded quite a while back. So tell me when and where that happened.
The album was recorded we started recording it in 2016. Right. Like New Year's Eve 2015, I'd been sending John and Yellow demos that entire year, all of 2015. Whether it was my voice memo from my phone or going into the studio or on my iPad, I would just send John stuff. As John and I progressed and talked, and he really wanted to make the record, we were trying to figure out what the band was going to be. And he suggested Steve. I'd met Steve years ago when I was in Verbena, and it happened really quick. It was suddenly like Steve was like, well, why don't Duke just come up here? And John was like, yeah, we can get Emil Amos from Holy Sons, because he and Steve were doing projects together with John. Right. And here comes the train.
Great. Bring it on. Right
on. And so, we did like a week at Sonic Youth Studio in 2016. I had said like that all I wanted to do in 2016 was learn how to open a business, like how to write a business plan. Man, I'm a creative. I don't know crap about all that. Yep. And man, we opened our doors September 10th, and I flew to New Jersey September 11th and started the record.
So you recorded in Hoboken, is that right?
Hoboken, baby. Yeah, it was great. But I mean, because Steve lived there and John lives there, and Emil was just in Brooklyn. So I just lived with John and his family, and we'd meet everybody at the studio, and we were there long hours. I mean, we knocked out all the rhythm tracks in a week. I'd go in with just Steve and Emil, sometimes just me and Steve at first, and work through the arrangements of it. And then when Emil got to the studio, we'd have it down. And we did all the rhythm tracks there. We did all the overdubs actually on the other side of this wall. Oh, okay. Is a recording studio called Communicating Vessels that's owned by Jeffrey Kane from a band Remy Zero, and now he's in The Church, right, out of Australia, right? And solo stuff. So we did John came down here, and we did all the overdubs next door at Communicating Vessels. And then early 2017, I think New Year's Day, I flew to New Jersey, and we mixed it at Water Music. And so it got mastered that February, and it's been done.
So what's the holdup?
The holdup was, well, at first the holdup was me finding the right home for it. Me not wanting to self-release it, like really loving the guys at Single Lock. And then also me changing the title twice, me changing the artwork and just searching. And it had already been several years, you know, by 2017, it had already been 4 years since my last record. So I didn't think waiting another year was a big deal. I didn't think a pandemic was going to come along.
Well, there you go. Nobody saw that one coming.
No, but man, part of the great thing about Single Lock was they wanted to release the record, but they asked if I could wait, you know, like, because they had a lot of projects on their plate. And I said, that's great, because I want to change things up visually. I really want to get dialed in. There's a specific person I want to work with. And so they reissued my first solo record called Etowah back in 2019. And we announced they were going to be doing this record. And then a few months later, pandemic hit. And I said, let's wait. I knew that I couldn't homeschool my kids, shut down my business, and try and promote a record at the same time.
Yeah. That's a bit much. Bit of an ask.
I mean, you know, the pandemic was great for some artists to do that. But for me, I knew I wanted to try and keep this foundation, our hub, going. And man, homeschooling a kid was no freaking joke. And my wife's art career just skyrocketed during the pandemic.
Really?
Took off. I mean, she's a full-time painter now. She had to step away from the business side of stuff with Club Duquette. So I was running all of that. And we're, you know, taking turns parenting and trying to teach a first grader what, like.
Nice.
Yeah, my heart goes out to teachers everywhere. Pay them more. Pay them a lot more.
Now, did you have a producer working with you on the record, John Agnello?
John and Yellow, yes. John and I go way, way back. I worked with him in the late 90s on some Verbena pre-production. Right. And, you know, grew up loving John's production work. Some of the stuff he did in the 80s that I loved, I didn't know about until much later in life. But like all the early Dinosaur Jr. and Sonic Youth he did, I was just drawn to that as a teenager. And so when we spent a week together in, I think, 97, 98, it's probably early 98, doing stuff with Verbena. And then we didn't see each other again for almost 20 years. And I tracked him down on social media and started sending him demos. And I mean, he's a deep friend, like deeply connected. And yeah, making this record was just effortless. There's a ton of pre-production that went in, but like when we went in the studio, it was laser focus and there was no egos.
So was there, what kind of conversations did you have about the sound or the feel that you wanted for the record?
So I sent John, like I tried to demo as close as I could to sound, like layering things as sonically as I could, sometimes with very limited stuff, but stacking a lot of vocals, sending John tracks by other bands that I was listening to, a lot of Kamasi Washington and Angela. Like, yeah, I mean, I don't play jazz, but I love Kamasi's like mystical influence of stuff.
Yeah, he played a gig around here a couple of years ago. It was just mind blowing.
Man, he's one of those guys like Sun Ra. Like when I saw Sun Ra when I was a teenager, I was like, no wonder he's from Juke. Man, this guy is operating on another plane. Yep. So all that stuff influenced me a lot sonically, and Richard Swift's production. Years ago, I'd always wanted to work with Richard, and so that gave John direction, and then I trusted him to just take it and run with it, and I trusted the band to do their parts. I'd say stuff if I felt like I needed to, but the big thing about bringing John on was his skill set that I didn't possess in the studio. I mean, he took like these layered harmonies and swirling guitars and a ton of synths, because all the demos were almost heavier on synths, but we just used a lot of trickery with guitars and remiking things to achieve a sound that can grow expansively, but not necessarily get louder in your ears. Right. And that was just like a really amazing thing.
Cool. I see the album begins with a track called Year to Run, and there's a video that goes with it and stuff. And it's kind of got this kind of grungy guitar sound to that. This is definitely not a grunge record, but there is some of that in there.
I can't help it, man. I'm a kid of the 90s.
There you go. I figured that was the case. Yeah.
Kid in the 70s, but teenager in the 90s.
We were waiting on the night, too blind to walk out of the fire.
Yeah, I think I remember writing that one just really fast on my acoustic. I think the demo for that song may even be acoustic, which is really wild because it's a bunch of stacked acoustic guitars still dropped down to D and doing that riff, and was just singing it to my wife and son, and that was it. And so John and Steve really elevated it up, and Emil's bass lines. It's just, it's a little grungy. I like a lot of noise.
What kind of stuck with you from your days in Verbena? Because that was kind of, the 90s, and you guys were right in the middle of it all. Is there what struck you as being important about that time?
Man, there's a ton of important about the time. The amount of like music that was coming out from the underground in that time was unbelievable. And my time with Verbena, a huge thing that has always stuck with me was our work ethic and what we did and the time we put into things. Like, a lot of people don't realize that back then you didn't have social media to even try and reach out and achieve stuff. And I know it's super saturated now, but back then you were in a van nonstop. But when we were home, we were writing and rehearsing and just pouring into the craft, into the sound, into getting the sonic templates we wanted for stuff. So that was like a huge influence on me, and what the bands we got to be around and witness. We went, we would work as loaders at shows to meet bands, and
right.
then I would sell the bands weed and then give them my demos. That's how we met My Bloody Valentine. And then we ended up spending a week on the road with My Bloody Valentine and Dinosaur Jr., helping change out their strobe light filters every night. So getting to experience that live and being like that intimate and close, and then you go play England as a young 20-year-old and all those bands are there, just being around all that, it influenced me tremendously. All the way to from finally, getting to work with Steve was kind of a dream come true.
Right. And do you have any, I know Scott Bondi or AA Bondi is doing stuff on his own. Do you have any contact with him, or what's the relationship like there?
We're friendly, but I don't really, he's out in California doing his thing. I'm in Alabama doing my thing. Les that was in Verbena, he produces a ton of records. He lives here in town. He used to live down the street from me. And then Anne Marie's, I think, out in Utah or somewhere. Everybody's civil, there's no. That's good. Man, that's, people ask me about that. I'm like, man, that was a long time ago, and we were young and wild as hell. And you got to let shit go and keep going.
Getting back to the record, there's a track called Motorcycles I kind of like. And you're kind of singing in like a higher register on that one. I noticed. Yeah. Tell me about that one a little bit if you can.
Another love to watch you rise. Times move slow and mothers cry. The fallen need someone in disguise. And all the years you prayed to die, the priest have come.
Yeah, so that song, that's one of the older songs on the record. I wrote that song for my uncle Mike, who was in a motorcycle wreck in 1972. He was a motorcycle racer. My dad raced for Husqvarna. My granddad raced. Everybody's kind of wild. But my uncle was in a crash that put him in a coma for 6 months. And during his time in the coma, he came out and told my mom all these things about the child she was pregnant with, which was me.
Right.
And about me being a musician and places I would go and things I would do. And most all of that has come true in my life.
Wow.
And he died. He lived longer, I think, than any other closed head injury patient in America, as far as we could tell at the time. But I think he had his last rites read to him probably 7 times or more. I can't tell you how many times I said goodbye to him. And one time I wrote that song, I had left intensive care saying goodbye to him because they were like, he will be dead by tomorrow morning. And I went and wrote that song. And the next day I went back and he was drinking a milkshake. He's passed away from us now, but he like after his motorcycle wreck when I was a kid, he was in a wheelchair and he loved to play chess and listen to music. And so I would just hang out with him all the time. He played me so many like old country records, Elvis records, Beatle records. He would make his own mixtapes. He had like multiple cassettes decks and would, bounce stuff from one tape deck to another, or record from his phonograph player to the tape deck and make these cool mixtapes. And I wrote that song as a dedication to him. All the lyrics are about his life and his devotion to his faith, which was his big thing.
Yeah.
And I love that song on the record because of the harmonies, the vocal harmonies on that just slay me.
And from your story that you told me about him talking about you in the womb or whatever, that leads me to Mystics, which is kind of close at the end. You're the end of the record there. What is your connection with mysticism and mystics?
I search for the mystics in my night. All of my dreams can come with pride. Oh, but you turn me back when you turn me on. We were holding back for you.
Well, it's blame my Catholic mother on that, I guess. I don't know. I think I've always had a knack for searching for stuff. I studied world religions when I was in high school. I thought I was a Buddhist. I, went to churches. I just trying to always search for a little bit of a deeper meaning and a more deeper meaning with the universe and what I'm creating and what I'm leaving behind for my son and my daughter. And I wanted to live a more mystical life. There was a point in time where I thought I would abandon everything and kind of be not a monk, but just dedicate my life to that search. It just happened to be through music. And that song I wrote very late at night in my bed with my wife and son next to me and was just singing all these lyrics. It was crazy. She was super ill and our son was tiny. We were running out of money. Our home was on the verge of being foreclosed on. It was just it was this wild time period. And as my lovely wife walks in to give me a coffee, that was amazing.
Hello.
Hi, how's it going?
Good, how are you?
Nice to see you.
You too. Have a good one.
So that song was at a point in my life, post having my second kid that I didn't know we could have, just being like, what is the meaning of all this? What am I doing? What is going on? What do we want to be in our future? And how are we connected to the universe on a more cosmic, grand sense of things?
Yeah. Now, we'll close out with talking about the closing track, Tonight. There's a video with that, and there's a rousing guitar solo. It kind of gives it a big thing going on at the end. Was it a plan to have that song fill out the album?
No, it was not planned. But when we got to the studio and we were digging 3 songs, and before we started tracking, John, we sat at his house the first night I flew there, and he was like, I think this song still needs work. We're not going to record it. This one maybe, but it'll be on the end. And he asked what else I had. And I told him, I was like, man, I've got this song that I've wanted to do for a very long time. And I just sang the chorus, and he was like, let's show it to Steve tomorrow and see what their range, what we work up. Because for me, it was always about having the right groove on that song. I've recorded multiple versions where I could not stand my vocals, where I was I put it out, but it wasn't quite right. But once we got in the studio with Steve and Emil on bass, we ran through it twice and it was just on. It's always been an anthem to me. I've been playing that song for years, and I love closing out shows with it and getting people to scream that.
Yeah. That
chorus can make you feel absolutely outstanding as a musician, a songwriter, and just as a crowd.
Yep.
I did it one time in a small place in New York for this mezcal company, Illegal Mezcal. I played a party. It was really late at night, just a bunch of 13 bands, all crammed in, plus all these fans. And I didn't know I was going to play, and I just did it. And I had the video of everyone singing that. And I still talk to people from that night that we connected with for that song, and we've stayed in touch. And that's been, 6 years ago. So,
yep, there you go.
yeah.
Nice. So what are your shows like these days? How are they going over?
Well, I've only done a couple since the pandemic.
Yeah.
I'm just now getting started and getting back, but great so far. I've got stuff at South by Southwest coming up.
Oh, that'll be fun.
Yeah, that'll be fun. That's with like the full band, and then a couple of like stripped down just solo shows, because I love that I can take the songs and also play them just solo electric.
Right.
We're releasing like 6 versions from the song on video that I did in my shop. And then I've got like a residency thing up in North Carolina where my wife showcases her art. We bring a little mini Duquette and I play. Yes, we're doing things a little different, man. I'm playing some gallery spaces, and I'll get to touring with the full band, but I love shaking it up and doing it for ways where we can connect straight to people more.
Yeah. Well, if you can get some time away from the shop, come down to New Zealand and play for us.
Man, I would leave this shop in a heartbeat to come to New Zealand and play for y'all.
All right.
You just make the time, Marty, and I'm there.
All righty. Very good. Well, thank you for talking to me. I appreciate it. Good luck with
Thank you,
everything. And
yeah,
keep on rocking.
you too, brother. We'll see you later.
Hello. Bye-bye.